They shook our hands. We let them count our teeth. I was standing at the back of the ratification hall on Lunar Station Meridian when the first speaker of the Vethkai delegation drifted to the signing table, and I knew before his pen touched the document that we had already lost something we had not yet named. The hall smelled like recycled air and expensive ambition. 300 humans in their best clothes. Camera drones swarming the ceiling like chrome flies. Secretary General Acaffer shook the first speaker's hand with both of his, and the room exhaled a collective breath it had been holding for 4 years of negotiations. I did not exhale. I was watching the first speaker's eyes. They never moved to Acaffer's face. They moved to the exits, to the security placements, to the ventilation grid above the eastern gallery. Slow, systematic, the way you read a room you are planning to leave in a hurry. I wrote it in my notes. I wrote a lot of things in my notes during that ceremony. My name is Lena Voss. At the time I was 26 years old, a junior diplomatic attaché with the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs, and my job at the Accord signing was to stand near the back and look credentialed. I was very good at looking credentialed. I was less good at staying quiet when I noticed things I was not supposed to notice. The Accord itself was 47 pages long. I had read all of them, twice. Then read them again at 2 in the morning with a cup of bad coffee and a growing feeling in my chest that I could not name then but can name now without any difficulty at all. The terms were simple in the way that a locked room is simple. Earth would provide the Vethkai with full technical documentation for the Helios drive, our prototype faster-than-light propulsion system, 8 years of research, the single most significant scientific achievement in human history. In exchange, the Vethkai would extend their jump lane network to include Earth's outer colonies and would provide what the Accord called military shelter for human settlements in contested space. I had spent a week with a raw Vethkai lexicon before the signing. The phrase they used, Vethrasunai, was rendered by the official translation software as mutual shelter. I had found the same phrase in a commercial shipping contract from 40 years earlier. In that context, the translation was different. The arrangement by which the smaller thing stays dry. I filed a report. The report went to my department head. My department head filed it in the category reserved for things that made people uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to actually act on. The ceremony took 4 hours. Afterward, there was a reception. I remember the drinks table. 47 glasses of Moselle Riesling, poured and waiting, a German vintage chosen specifically because the cultural briefing document had flagged Earth wine as a gesture of sincerity. A human offering that said, "We trust you with our small, good things." Not a single member of the Vethkai delegation touched a glass. Not one. They did not decline. They did not look at the glasses and turn away. They simply did not look at them at all. The way you do not look at something that belongs to a chapter of events you have already closed. I drank mine. It was very good. I stood there with my glass and my notes and my credentialed face, and I watched the Secretary General laugh at something the first speaker said, and I thought, we have given them the key. We are standing in the hallway, and they have already started checking which doors it opens. 6 months passed. I spent them learning Wrath, not the trade dialect, the military register. The Wrath Collective were the dominant power in the contested space regions where Earth's outer colonies sat, and nobody else in my department was learning their language, which seemed to me like an interesting professional gap to fill. I also spent those 6 months requesting 3 follow-up meetings with my department head about the Vethrasunai translation. He responded to none of them. On a Tuesday morning at 3 in the morning, Earth Standard Time, they transmitted the complete Helios drive schematics to the Wrath Collective. I was in the office. I had been in the office since midnight, going through a new batch of Wrath intercepts. The alert came through on the classified channel, then the second alert, then the third. By Thursday, 17 Wrath warships were sitting inside our jump lane access points. Every frontier station in sectors 7 through 14 went dark. The outer colonies, 412,000 humans, spread across 11 stations and 6 planetary outposts, went silent behind Wrath blockade lines. By Friday, the Vethkai first speaker released a statement. He expressed regret at the regrettable circumstances. He expressed hope for continued dialogue. He used the word complex 4 times in 8 sentences. I was in the emergency session when the Secretary General received the message. He read it twice. Then he sat down in a chair that was not his chair and looked at the floor. I looked at my datapad. I pulled up my 6-month-old report, the one about the translation, the one about the glasses. I closed it again. There was nothing in it that helped now. It only proved that we had seen it coming and walked through the door anyway, smiling, because the alternative was admitting that 4 years of hope and ceremony and very good wine had been arranged for someone else's purpose from the start. The Secretary General asked the room what options we had. I did not speak. It was not my meeting. I was 26 years old and I was standing at the back again, and this time I was not watching the exits. I was counting what we had left. 16 ships, 6 operational jump planes, 400,000 people behind a wall we had helped them build, and 1 translation file that nobody had read. I walked out of the session at hour 3. I went to my office. I made terrible coffee. I opened every Wrath Intercept file I had and started from the beginning. Not because I had a plan. Because the alternative was standing still, and I had watched what happened to things that stayed still long enough for someone else to arrange them. The coffee was very bad. Noted. The numbers arrived in waves, the way bad news always does, not all at once, which would at least be efficient, but in a slow procession that made you think each one was the last before the next one came. 17 jump planes locked, that was the first number. 11 frontier stations dark, that was the second. 412,000 humans unreachable behind Wrath blockade lines, that was the third, and it sat in the chest differently from the others because it had faces attached to it. Colonists, engineers, children, people who had moved to the outer settlements because they believed the accord made it safe to do so. I had been awake for 31 hours when Admiral Clara Ewan found me in the 3rd-floor corridor of the Emergency Command building. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair and the specific expression of a person who had been delivering bad news, so often it had begun to lose its texture. She looked at me, the way doctors look at you before they change the tone of their voice. "Vas walk with me." I walked with her. She did not speak for the first 2 minutes. We passed 3 other officers in the corridor, each of them moving with the particular focus of people who were very busy and very scared, and had decided to only show the busy part. "We need a fleet commander," Ewan said. "Yes," I said. "We need someone the diplomatic corps recognizes, someone who was present for the accord negotiations, someone who has documented history with their communication protocols." "Yes," I said again, because I could see exactly where this was going, and saying yes was easier than saying what I actually wanted to say, which was, "You have run out of better options and you know it and I know it, and we are both going to pretend this is a strategic decision rather than a last resort." "The ESN Meridian Actual," she said. 4 cruisers, 11 destroyers, 2 carrier-class vessels. She handed me the crew manifest. I looked at it. The carriers were at 30% complement. The other 70% were stationed in the outer lanes when the blockade locked down. The destroyers had been retrofitted on a 6-week schedule that was supposed to be 12. 2 of the cruisers were fresh out of dry dock and had not completed weapons calibration. "How many ships does the Wrath blockade have?" I asked. "Current intelligence estimate suggests between 60 and 80 vessels." Current intelligence, I said carefully, is the same intelligence that did not flag the Vethkai transmission. Yuan did not answer. That was an answer. I folded the manifest, put it in my jacket pocket, stood there in the corridor with the recycled air and the sound of people moving fast in other rooms, and I thought about what 16 ships were for when the fight called for 80. Not a mission, a marker, something to point at afterward and say, we sent someone, we tried. We did not simply hand over the terms. When do I board? I said. 14 hours. I nodded, turned to go. Voss. I stopped. The Secretary General wanted someone more senior, Yuan said. I pushed for you. I looked back at her. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Then, because the senior staff are thinking about what we can defend, you're the only one I've seen thinking about what we can use. I did not say thank you. It did not feel like a compliment. It felt like being handed a problem that the people handing it to you had already decided was unsolvable, which is a particular kind of loneliness I do not recommend. I went back to my office. I packed one bag. I took my translation files. I took the complete archive of Wrath intercepts, 8 months of communications that the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs had only partially translated, because nobody in the department read Wrath Military Register. I also took the coffee from my desk. It was terrible coffee, but it was mine. The Meridian Actual was docked at Base 7. I boarded at 400 and walked the command deck alone for a few minutes before the crew arrived for briefing. It still smelled like the previous commander. Commander Owen Reyes had run this ship for 11 years. Coffee drinker. Notorious. His mug was still on the station console beside the main display, ceramic, dark brown, with a chip in the handle from an incident during the Kepler debris field 3 years ago. He had declined to replace it. The ship's manifest noted it as personal property, uncollected, pending next of kin notification. Reyes had been on Frontier Station 9 when the blockade came down. I picked up the mug, looked at it, set it back down. Sat in his chair. Thought about the specific weight of being 29 years old and sitting in a dead man's chair with 16 ships and a translation file, pointed at a problem that required 80. My executive officer arrived at 4:30. Lieutenant Commander Patrick Osai, tall, precise, with the controlled energy of someone who had been briefed on this assignment and had decided not to show what he thought of it. He came to attention at the door. Commander Voss. At ease, Osai. Pull up the Wrath Intercept archive on the secondary tactical display, everything from the last 8 months. He moved to do it, paused. We have combat deployment briefings scheduled for 0500. Good, run them simultaneously. I opened the first intercept file. I need a linguistics module configured for Wrath Military Register, not the trade dialect, military. He was quiet for a moment. We are going into a combat situation, Commander. Yes, I scrolled through the intercepts. We are going into a combat situation against people who have been talking to the Vethkai for 40 years. I want to know what they were told. We know what they were told. They were told to take the lanes. They were told to take the lanes, I agreed. Nobody's asked why they agreed. The Wrath Collective has been at cold peace with human space for 20 years. They had no territorial claim here. They accepted a deal that puts them in direct military confrontation with Earth for what, exactly? Jump plane access they could have negotiated for through standard channels. That's not a reason. That's a payment. I want to know what the actual offer was. Osai looked at me for a long moment. He had the expression of a man deciding whether the person in front of him was very smart or deeply unrealistic, and landing on the uneasy possibility that both might be true at the same time. I'll configure the module, he said. The crew briefing was at 500, 43 officers, 211 crew. They were tired and scared and professional enough to keep the scared part under control. I did not give them a speech. I gave them the facts, our objective, our assets, our constraints. I told them we were not going to win a weapons exchange with 60 Wrath warships, and they should not expect to. I told them we were going to try something else first. "What's the something else?" asked Ensign Petra Walsh from the navigation console. She was 22, the youngest officer on the bridge. She asked the question the others were thinking, which made her either the bravest or the least experienced person in the room. I thought about that. "The Vethkai translated something for the Wrath," I said. "I want to check if the translation was accurate." Silence. Then Walsh said, very quietly, "That's either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard or the most terrifying." "Probably both," Osai said, in the tone of a man who had stopped fighting the current and decided to swim with it. We departed at 600. I spent the first 18 hours of the approach going through the Wrath intercepts end to end. Not the summaries, the raw text. Military register is dense and structured, built for precision rather than diplomacy, which meant that when something was vague, the vagueness was deliberate. And there were 3 places in the intercepts where something important had been left deliberately vague. The Vethkai had told the Wrath that humanity was resource-dense and structurally fragile. Standard devaluation language. Fine. Expected. But there was a third element mentioned in every exchange. A phrase that kept recurring in the Wrath responses. A question they kept asking in different forms over 40 years of contact. When will the interior be accessible? Not the lanes, not the colonies. The interior, Earth's solar system, the inner planets. They were not asking about the outer territories. They were asking about what was behind them. I sat back in Ray's chair and looked at the mug. Drank cold coffee. The Wrath had not taken the lanes because they wanted the lanes. The lanes were a door. And somebody had told them there was something worth walking through a door for. Something in Earth's interior that the Vethkai had promised would be accessible once the outer settlements were contained, once we were standing still, once we had stopped moving long enough for someone else to take stock of everything we had and everything we were. I did not know what the something was yet, but I knew what it felt like to be in a room where a deal like that got made. I had been there. I had watched 47 glasses of wine sit untouched on a table. I picked up Ray's mug. Drank. Noted. We came out of the last open jump plane at 0.3 times the speed of light, and before the display had finished resolving, there were 17 Wrath warships on screen. Then 22. Then 29. I watched the number climb and did not say anything. Osai was beside me running threat assessments. Walsh had her hands on the navigation controls. The entire bridge crew was very quiet in the way that people are quiet when they are waiting to see what the person in charge is going to do, because the answer to that question will determine what the next few minutes of their lives look like. "Weapons hot?" Osei asked. "Not yet. Commander, they have firing solutions on all 16 of our ships already." "I know." I had the translation module open. My hands were on the keyboard. "Open a broadcast channel, all Wrath frequencies, common, military, and trade." He did it without arguing. I had noticed he had moved past arguing somewhere around hour 20 of the approach. He had settled into a mode I recognized from experienced officers who had decided that if they were going to follow an unusual order, they were going to follow it precisely and at full speed. I broadcast in 3 registers simultaneously. Not a threat, not a demand for negotiation, not a statement of terms. A question. Specifically, in Wrath Military Register, as clean and direct as I could make it. What were you told would happen after the lanes opened? I sent it, leaned back, watched the display. Walsh turned in her chair. That's it, that's the message. That's the message. To 30 Wrath warships. 29, Osei corrected, checking the count. To 29 Wrath warships, Walsh said. Yes. She turned back to her console, made a small sound that might have been a prayer or might have been the kind of laugh that comes out when all other options are exhausted. We waited. 14 seconds. 20. 30. The Wrath fleet did not fire, did not advance. 29 warships held position in the dark between stars, and we held ours, and the silence on the channel was the specific silence of something being considered rather than ignored. At 38 seconds, a response came through. I had expected Wrath military register. I had prepared for Wrath military register. I had 3 follow-up transmissions ready in Wrath military register. The response came in Vethkai diplomatic dialect. I sat very still. Not Wrath. Vethkai. Which meant the response was not coming from the Wrath commander. Run a positional sweep of the blockade formation, I said. Full spectrum. I want every vessel identified. I ran it. The results came back in 11 seconds. Embedded in the rear formation, positioned behind 3 Wrath cruisers in a configuration that a quick scan would read as standard military clustering, 1 Vethkai diplomatic vessel. Not a warship. A long-range contact ship, the kind used for extended political assignments. It had been there the whole time. Watching. I read the Vethkai transmission. 3 sentences. The first confirmed that the diplomatic representative was present in an observational capacity. The second expressed that direct communication with Earth vessels was outside the current mandate. The third said, the terms of the interior arrangement are not a matter for this channel. I read it twice. Then I pulled up the full Wrath Intercept archive, not the summaries, the raw text, with my own translations, and cross-referenced every instance of the phrase interior arrangement against the Vethkai diplomatic vocabulary index I had been building for 3 years. It took 4 minutes. Walsh watched the display. I watched me. The rest of the bridge crew pretended to monitor their stations while actually watching me. When I found it, I did not react immediately. I sat with it for a moment because the thing I had found required sitting with. The Vethkai had not simply sold Earth's jump planes to the Wrath. They had sold both parties a version of the situation designed to produce a specific outcome. They told the Wrath that humanity was fragile, isolated, and would collapse quickly under pressure, after which Wrath colonization rights to the outer settlements would activate. They told Earth that the accord was mutual protection. But the interior arrangement, the third layer, the one neither party had been shown directly, was not about lanes or colonies or Helios drive schematics at all. It was about something inside our solar system, something the Vethkai had identified and valued and quietly arranged to have accessible once both Earth and the Wrath were sufficiently occupied with each other to stop paying attention to what was happening behind them. I did not yet know what it was. But I now knew that the Wrath commander on the other end of this channel had been told a story, and the story had a hole in it, and the hole was everything that was currently sitting in my translation files. Compile the full Intercept archive, I said. My translations, not the DUEA summaries, everything. Format it for Wrath military transmission standards. Ose looked at me, all of it. Every exchange, every instance of interior arrangement, every place where the Vethkai summary to the Wrath does not match what they said to us, side by side, no commentary, raw comparison. That will take 20 minutes to format. Then start now. He started. I opened a second channel, this one narrow, aimed directly at the diplomatic vessel. I sent one transmission, 6 words in Vethkai diplomatic register. We are reading the same documents now. 40 seconds later, the Vethkai vessel began broadcasting to the Wrath fleet. Emergency band. High priority. I did not need to translate it to know what it was. It had the rhythm and cadence of a denial, of someone trying to get ahead of something before it became visible. They were attempting to cut the channel, to step between the Wrath Commander and whatever I was about to show him. I had been in rooms where that happened before. Targeting solution on the Vethkai vessel, I said. Weapons team. Lieutenant Curran Maida at the weapons station, 27 years old, very good at his job, with the precise hands of someone who had grown up playing instruments before he grew up flying ships, turned to look at me. Targeting their communications array, I said. One shot, non-lethal, hull integrity maintained. I want them blind and mute, not destroyed. He ran the calculation. Confirmed, ready on your order. Fire. The shot was clean, 23 seconds from the targeting lock to the impact. The Vethkai vessel's communications array went dark on the display, hull intact, crew unharmed, but suddenly very alone in a fleet full of Wrath warships with no way to manage what was about to happen next. Intercept archive ready, Osai said. Send it to the Wrath flagship, all of it. No cover message, no request for response, just the data. He sent it. We waited again. The bridge was so quiet I could hear Walsh's navigation console cycling through its passive scan loop. I could hear Maida running a secondary check on the weapons array that did not need checking. I could hear my own heartbeat, which was doing something complicated in my chest but keeping it to itself. 43 seconds. The response came in Wrath military register. The commander's personal authentication code on the header, which in Wrath communication protocol meant the message was coming directly from the decision-making authority with no intermediary filtering. 4 words in common, not even in Wrath. 4 words chosen, I think, because they were the simplest possible way to say something that required exactly that kind of simplicity. Show us the rest. I exhaled. Walsh made a sound. Osai put both hands flat on his console and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Respond, I said. Tell them we will need 30 minutes to prepare a full transmission package. Tell them we request a communication hold during that period, no movement, no targeting solutions. And if they don't agree to the hold? They already agreed, I said. They asked for the rest. You don't ask for more of something you're planning to destroy in the next 30 minutes. We transmitted the hold request. The Wrath flagship acknowledged it in 11 seconds. I spent the next 30 minutes putting together everything, not just the intercepts, the original Accord documentation, the Vethra Sunai translation discrepancy, the DUEA filing record showing that the report I had submitted 14 months ago had been received, logged, and never acted on. The diplomatic vessel's position in the blockade formation, the fact that it had been there, watching, since the lanes closed. Every piece of it. Walsh helped me format the Wrath sections. Maida ran the encryption for the secure channel. Os coordinated the transmission structure without me asking him to. At one point he looked at me and said, "You built this case in 14 months and nobody listened." No, I said. Now 30 Wrath warships are listening. 29, I said. He made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh I had heard on that bridge since we departed. We sent the full package to the Wrath flagship at the end of the hold period. Then we waited. The response took longer this time, 11 minutes. I suspected there was a great deal happening on the Wrath command deck during those 11 minutes that I would have given a great deal to observe. When it came, it was longer than 4 words. The Wrath commander, Commander Velora, I would later learn her name, sent a formal communication in military register. I translated it myself, without the module, because I wanted to be certain. She said, "We have reviewed the documentation. We have reviewed the account of our own communications. We are prepared to discuss the matter of the interior arrangement and the identity of the third party involved. We request a direct command channel. We request that the Earth Fleet commander be present." I sat back. Third party. She had said third party, which meant the Wrath already knew, or suspected, that the Vethkai had not been the origin of the arrangement, that there was something else behind it, something that had set both our civilizations against each other like pieces moved on a board by hands neither of us had seen. I looked at Ray's mug. There was still cold coffee in it. I drank it. Opened the command channel. Commander Velora, I said in Wrath Military Register, as precisely as I knew how. I am Commander Lena Voss of the Earth ship Meridian Actual. I am present. Let us talk about the third party. The silence on the channel lasted 3 seconds. Then her voice came through, low, measured, with the specific weight of a person who had just made a decision they had not yet fully calculated the cost of. Commander Voss, we have a great deal to discuss. Yes, I said. We were told you would not be prepared for this conversation. I looked at my translation files, at the 14 months of work sitting open on the secondary display, at the 43 pages of an accord that had smelled like a locked room from the moment I read it. Someone was wrong about that, I said. And we began. There is no manual for building a joint fleet with a civilization you were blockading 72 hours earlier. I know this because I looked for one. OS helped me look. We checked every tactical protocol in the Earth Space Navy database, every diplomatic operations file, every recorded instance of rapid interspecies military coordination in the 42 years since humanity had made first contact. Nothing. Which meant we were going to have to invent it, in a ship that still smelled like someone else's coffee, with 31 Wrath warships pulling into formation behind us, and a crew that was doing an extraordinary job of looking professional while processing the fact that the people they had come here to fight were now flying on their wing. Commander Velora's flagship was a vessel called the Kor Ashvath, which translated, I discovered, as something close to the thing that does not retreat. She was a practical name for a practical ship, built wide and dense in the way that Wrath engineering philosophy preferred, all mass and endurance rather than speed and precision. She made the Meridian Actual look light by comparison. Velora herself communicated in short, precise transmissions. She did not waste words. I respected that. I tried to match it. Our first joint command session lasted 4 hours. Walsh and Maida attended from our side. Velora brought 2 of her own officers whose names I will do my best to represent. Her tactical commander and her chief engineer, whose names transliterated into common as something approximating Vor and Vetharel, respectively. Vetharel was the engineer. She expressed disagreement through a subsonic register that I could feel through the deck plates before my translation module caught up with the meaning. The first hour was logistics, shared communication frequencies, formation protocols, weapons calibration standards. Osai and Vor ran the technical side. Osai had a remarkable ability to build systems in real time that I had always admired, and Vor had the same quality, which meant they worked together in the specific way that 2 very organized people work together when they discover the other person is also very organized. Not warmly, exactly, but with a deep mutual recognition that accelerated everything. The second hour was intelligence sharing. Velora confirmed what I had suspected from the intercepts. The Wrath had been approached 43 years ago by what they understood to be a Vethkai commercial intermediary. The intermediary had provided data on human space, colony locations, resource distributions, military capacity, and had described an opportunity for Wrath expansion into the outer territories. The deal had been presented as simple and one-sided in the Wrath's favor. The Wrath had asked, over 4 decades of ongoing contact, what the interior arrangement referred to. What was the thing inside Earth's solar system that made the outer territories worth controlling? The answer they had always received was a variation of, accessible when the conditions are correct. They had never received a specific answer. Because the specific answer was not for you, I said. Velora was quiet for a moment. Explain. I pulled up the intercept sequence that I had been working through since hour 18 of our approach. The specific pattern I had identified in the Vethkai language, not in what they said, but in what they consistently did not say when speaking to the Wrath versus what they said to Earth versus what they said internally. The Vethkai had been the facilitators. That was their role. They arranged the confrontation between Earth and the Wrath because a confrontation served the interest of whoever had designed the interior arrangement. But the Vethkai were not the designers. They were instruments. Someone told the Vethkai what to do, I said. Someone who knew what was in our solar system. Someone who had access to Earth origin information about our interior resources, our planetary surveys, our development plans. Velora said, a third species. Not necessarily, I said. The room was quiet. Osai looked at me. Walsh, who was monitoring the communication feed from the back of the room, looked at me. I have been going through the commercial registry cross-references for the last 6 hours, I said. The entity coordinating the Vethkai approach to the Wrath is not in any alien civilization database. The financial structure, the communication style, the specific knowledge of Earth's interior resource surveys, all of it is consistent with one origin. I put the corporate charter on the screen. Hellion Meridian Extraterrestrial Group, registered on Earth, lunar address, established 12 years ago, major shareholders, 7 individuals, all human, 3 of whom had attended the accord signing in official capacities. No one spoke for 10 seconds. Then Vetharo produced a sound through the deck plates that my module translated as, the feeling of discovering the walls of a room are closer than they appeared. I thought that was an exceptionally accurate translation. Velora said in a very flat tone, humans arranged this. Some humans, I said. 7 specific humans with a lunar address and a corporate charter and access to 40 years of planetary survey data, who decided that the most efficient way to extract value from Earth's interior resources was to arrange for Earth and the Wrath to spend enough time and energy fighting each other that neither of us would notice what was happening behind us. Velora processed this. She had a way of going very still when she was thinking, not the stillness of hesitation, but the stillness of a person running calculations behind their eyes at significant speed. They used us, she said finally. Yes. They told us you were weak. Yes. They told us the outer settlements would surrender in days. They were wrong about that, I said. The outer settlements have not surrendered. They are blockaded, but they are holding. Another silence. Then from Velora something unexpected. We apologize for the blockade. I had not prepared for that sentence. It arrived cleanly, without ceremony, in the same tone she used for tactical data. Not performative, just direct. I said, we will want the lanes reopened. Agreed. And the 400,000 people in the outer settlements returned to full communication and supply access. Agreed. And your full cooperation in identifying and addressing the interior arrangement. Agreed, she paused. We want the 7 humans. So do we, I said. They are on the moon, I know the address. Osai made a sound. It was the sound of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything that happened in this command room and had settled into a state of calm, continuous astonishment. The next 72 hours were the most logistically complex of my life. Building a joint human Wrath fleet from 2 military traditions with different formation doctrines, different propulsion systems, different communication standards, and absolutely no shared protocol history required the invention of entirely new procedures in real time. Osai and Vor built a shared comm architecture from scratch. Walsh recalibrated our navigation systems to account for Wrath mass profiles in formation. Maida worked with Vetharo on the question of whether our weapons and theirs could operate in coordinated patterns without interference. A question that turned out to require 8 hours of engineering testing, and one very alarming moment, when a wrath power surge briefly took 3 of our secondary systems offline. Vetharal expressed regret about the power surge through the deck plates. My module rendered it as the sensation of breaking a thing one was trying to fix, but knowing the fix is still possible. I told her no harm done. She produced a different frequency in response, one my module had not cataloged yet. I added it to the database. Later I would translate it as something close to appreciation expressed without obligation. On the second night, I was alone in the command room running through formation data when Walsh appeared with 2 cups of coffee. She set one down near me without asking. I looked at it. It was better than the coffee I made myself. "How are you holding up?" she said. She was 22. She had come onto this ship thinking it was a last stand and had spent 3 days watching it become something else. She had the particular brightness in her eyes of someone who had been very frightened and then been given something to do with the fear. "I'm fine," I said. "You haven't slept." "I'll sleep when the lanes are open." She looked at her console, then at me. "Do you think it's going to work, the whole thing going back, the 7 names?" I thought about 47 glasses of wine, about a chip-handled mug, about a 23-second weapons shot that had knocked out a communications array without breaking a hull. "Yes," I said, "I think so." "How do you know?" "Because they built their plan on the assumption that we would stay exactly where they put us." I looked at the formation display, 47 ships, human and wrath, holding in the dark together. That was their only mistake. Walsh was quiet for a moment. "Then 47 ships." "Yes." She looked at me with an expression I did not have a translation for. "Of course it's 47, she said. And I had no response to that except to drink my coffee, which was, against all probability, quite good. On the third morning, I sent one message to Admiral Ewan, 11 words. "The third party has a lunar address. Prepare arrest warrants. We are coming home." She sent back 3. "How many ships?" I looked at the formation display. 47 vessels, human and wrath, oriented toward Earth's solar system. Velora's flag on the command channel, steady and clear. Osai at his station. Walsh at navigation. Maida at weapons. Vetharal's subsonic frequencies running through the hull like a second heartbeat. I did not respond to Ewan. I let her wonder. I picked up Ray's mug. It was empty. I filled it from Walsh's coffee supply, which was better than mine. Drank. Noted. We came through the last jump plane at 0.4 times the speed of light, and Earth was there. The same blue and unremarkable and still existing planet it had always been, and I felt something shift in the back of my throat that I did not name because nomming it would have taken time I did not have. 47 ships materialized in Earth orbit like a conclusion that had been working its way forward for a very long time. The first response from Lunar Station Meridian came through at 47, an emergency frequency alert, standard, triggered by the mass signature of 47 vessels appearing simultaneously in the controlled approach zone. Standard protocol. No intelligence in it yet, just the automated reflexes of a system that had detected something large and unexpected. The second response came 40 seconds later. That one had human hands on it. Someone in Meridian's traffic control reading the sensor data and then reading it again because the first reading had produced results that did not fit any expected scenario. Meridian Actual, this is Lunar Station Meridian Traffic Control. Please identify full fleet composition. Osai looked at me. Identify us, I said. All 47 vessels, full registration. He transmitted. The response from traffic control took 68 seconds, which told me someone had walked the data to a supervisor, who had walked it to someone else, who was currently sitting in a room making the face that people make when the situation has moved past the procedures they were trained for. While we waited, the Hellion Meridian extraterrestrial group made its move. 6 corporate security vessels launched from Lunar Station Bay 14, private military contractors, the kind that corporate charters with enough capital could maintain under the current legal framework for asset protection in contested space environments. They were well armed. They were expensive. They were the largest ships Hellion could deploy, and they moved in a formation designed to communicate seriousness. They were the 6th and 7th largest vessel in a formation of 47. I watched them on the display. They held their position between us and the station, professional enough not to fire first, waiting to see if the sight of them would change the calculus. Osai said, "They're hailing us." "Not yet," I said. "Open a broadcast, all frequencies, public, commercial, emergency, diplomatic, every channel that can be received on Earth's surface, in Earth orbit, and on the moon." He opened it. I did not say my name. I did not give a speech. I did not announce what we were doing or why. I read the charter documents. All of them. I had prepared the reading during the approach, organized chronologically, starting with the founding of Hellion Meridian Extraterrestrial Group 12 years ago, the names of the 7 primary shareholders, the original stated purpose of the company. Then the first contact record with the Vethkai intermediary. Then the financial transaction records of partial, but enough. Then the specific provisions they had inserted into the Accord negotiation framework through their 3 representatives, provisions designed to make the Helios drive transfer look like a diplomatic necessity rather than a commercial arrangement. Then the Wrath intercept cross-references. Then the interior arrangement documentation, the planetary survey data that Hellion had accessed through their Accord-era clearances, and transmitted to the Vethkai for the purpose of identifying what Earth's solar system contained that was worth arranging a war to access. No commentary, no editorial. Names, dates, transactions. Raw data on every channel that any human, anywhere, could receive. At minute 4, the first corporate security vessel went to passive systems. Not a retreat, just a cessation of the active readiness posture that communicates intent. They were still there. They had simply stopped performing confidence. At minute 7, traffic control at Lunar Station sent an unprompted message. "Meridian Actual, we are logging this transmission as emergency public record. Please continue." At minute 9, the second corporate security vessel stood down. By minute 12, all 6 had gone passive. I finished the reading at 13 minutes and 40 seconds. Then I said, into every open channel, in the same tone I had used throughout. The outer colonies contain 412,000 human citizens who have been blockaded for the duration of this arrangement. Those citizens require immediate restoration of supply and communication access, which the Wrath Collective has already agreed to provide. The jump lanes are being reopened now. On the command channel, Velora's voice, "Confirmed, lane restoration underway." I closed the broadcast channel. Walsh let out a long, slow breath. Maida said nothing. He was looking at his console with the focused expression of a person who had been ready to fire and was now very carefully unmaking that readiness, which requires its own kind of attention. Osai turned in his chair and looked at me directly. He had been my executive officer for 11 days. He had not slept more than 4 hours at a stretch in 9 of those days. He had built a shared communication architecture from scratch, managed a cross-species formation through 2 jump transits, and maintained the complete appearance of professional composure through events that had no protocols. He said, "Commander, well done." I said, "We're not finished." He nodded, turned back to his console, continued working. Admiral Ewan hailed us at minute 16, after the broadcast ended. She came through on the command channel, her face on the secondary display, and she looked like a person who had been expecting to receive defeat at this hour, and had received something she did not yet have a category for. "Voss," she said. "Admiral, the Security Council is watching the broadcast record." "Good. The 7 shareholders are still on the moon." "I know," I said. "The broadcast has been running for 16 minutes. If they haven't moved by now, they're not going to. They believe their position was secure. People who believe their position is secure don't develop exit strategies." Ewan was quiet for a moment. "I have arrest teams standing by at the lunar address." "Then send them." She nodded, moved to close the channel, then stopped. "The Wrath Fleet," she said. "You trust them." I thought about Velora's forward transmission in the dark between stars, about Vetharel's subsonic frequencies running through the hull like a second heartbeat, about the apology delivered without ceremony, in the same tone as tactical data, because it was simply a fact that needed to be said. "The Wrath Commander apologized for the blockade on day 1 of joint operations," I said, in the same sentence as agreeing to reopen the lanes. "No conditions, no negotiations." I looked at the formation display. We were set against each other by people who assumed we wouldn't talk to each other. The moment we did, the arrangement collapsed. Ewan held my gaze for a moment. "Come in when you're ready," she said. She closed the channel. The arrests happened at 3:12 Earth Standard Time. Admiral Ewan led the team herself, which I was told later was not strictly part of her operational role, but which nobody had felt inclined to point out to her. The 7 shareholders of Hellion Meridian Extraterrestrial Group were detained at their lunar address, a suite of private offices that had very good views of Earth from the observation gallery, and a corporate coffee machine that cost more than my annual salary. I was not there. I was on the command deck of the Meridian Actual, working through the de-escalation communications with the Diplomatic Corps, which had been ongoing since hour 3 after our arrival in Earth orbit. The third speaker had been on the channel for most of that time, cycling through a formal apology register that was structurally 14 minutes long and required a response of comparable length before the next segment could proceed. I had not given it the 14-minute response. I had given it 2 words. "Noted, continue." The third speaker had stopped. There was a pause. Then, "That is a non-standard acknowledgement form." "Yes," I said. "We will discuss standard forms when the lanes are fully restored and the outer colonies are resupplied. Until that point, we are in operational mode. Noted is the operational acknowledgement." Another pause. "We were told," the third speaker said carefully, "that Earth's diplomatic representative would be less direct than this." "Someone was wrong about that," I said. It was the second time I had said that in 11 days. It did not become less satisfying. By 800, all 11 frontier stations had reported restored communication. By 1100, the first resupply runs were underway to the outer colonies. By 1400, the first messages from colonists were coming through, fragmentary at first, then in volume, 400,000 people's worth of relief and anger, and the particular exhaustion of people who have been very frightened for a long time, and are only now allowing themselves to stop holding the fear in their chest. I read some of them, not all. There were too many. I read the ones from Frontier Station 9. OSI found me doing this and quietly moved to another part of the command deck and left me alone, which was the correct decision and one I was grateful for. At 1600, Ewan asked me to attend a Security Council briefing. I attended. The council had 14 questions. I answered them. Some of the questions were about the tactical decisions I had made, the shot at the Vethkai communications array, the decision to broadcast the corporate documents publicly before the arrest team had moved. These questions had the specific character of questions asked by people who are preparing to decide whether something was authorized, which is a different question from whether it was correct. I answered them in the same tone. I had used for the broadcast. Facts, chronology, data. At the end, Secretary General HFY, who had aged considerably since the accord signing, or perhaps I was simply seeing him more clearly, said, "Commander Voss, the Council would like to formally recognize your actions during this engagement." "Thank you," I said. "We would like to present a commendation at a ceremony next week." I thought about what I wanted, not the commendation, not the ceremony. I said, "What I want is the outer colonists' resupply prioritized above the bureaucratic processing timeline. Currently, the first resupply runs are being routed through standard customs clearance. That's adding 40 to 70 hours per station. These people have been blockaded for 9 weeks. They can be cleared retroactively." HFY looked at me. "I also want a formal review of the DUEA filing system," I said. "Specifically the protocol for handling analyst reports flagging concerns in active diplomatic negotiations. There is a category for such reports. The category appears to be designed for storage rather than review." Voss. "And I would like one of the 47 glasses of Moselle Riesling from the Accord reception to be located, if any are still in evidence storage, and sent to Commander Velora of the Wrath Collective as a formal gesture of introduction. She drinks something similar, it turns out. Different fermentation, but the structural preference is comparable." I paused. 47 is a number that has been following this whole situation. I think it would be noticed. I think noticing it would be appropriate. The Council was very quiet. HFY said, "I'll authorize the resupply clearance immediately." "Thank you," I said. "The other items can wait for next week's ceremony," I said. "I understand there will be time on the schedule." I left the council chamber, walked back through the corridor that still smelled like carpet cleaner, and now, something else I could not name immediately, something that had arrived in the building since the morning and had not been there before. Osai was waiting in the corridor. "The outer lanes are all green," he said. "Last station confirmed communications restored at 1547. "Good. Vetharel sent a transmission," he said. "Personal for you." I stopped. "What does it say?" He held out the translated text, one sentence. "She says, the hull still vibrates at the frequency we calibrated together. She considers this a good sign." I read it twice, folded the paper, put it in my jacket pocket next to the crew manifest I had carried since day one. "Tell her," I said, "that I consider it a good sign as well, and that I will be in contact about the interior arrangement investigation. We still do not know exactly what Hellion was planning to extract from our solar system. That question is not closed." "Understood." I walked back to the docking bay. The Meridian Actual was still berthed at Lunar Station Bay 7. I had not formally stood down from the command chair, and so I went back to the command deck, which was quieter now, running on a reduced crew as the rest of the team rotated to rest cycles. Walsh was at her station. She had been awake for almost as long as I had. I sat down. Not in Ray's chair. I had been using it for 11 days. I sat in it again. The command deck was quiet. Earth on the main display, blue and unremarkable and still there. The outer lanes, green across the board. Walsh turned around. "Commander," she said, "we're clear for home approach." I looked at the display. 47 ships in formation, human and Wrath together, holding in the space above the planet that we had all been working our way back toward for 11 days through various kinds of impossible. I picked up Ray's mug. Someone had refilled it at some point, Walsh, probably, with her better coffee. I drank. It was good. "Noted," I said. And we went home. They had set two civilizations against each other, and counted on neither one asking the other a single question. They were wrong about us. They were wrong about all of us. And somewhere in the dark between stars, 47 ships flew in the same formation, at the same speed, toward the same horizon. It was not the ending anyone had planned. It was the one we made.